is a clarity training on using the Client History tab. The Client History tab is the central hub of the client record, and it'll include a full history of everything that has been entered into the client record since they have been created for the system. To get to the Client History tab, you first need to pull up a client. So type in the client's name in the search bar and open a client profile. When the client's profile is open, you'll find the History tab at the top in the list of all the different tabs. Right underneath of the client's name, you'll find History. Click on History to bring up the client's entire historical record. This is the full history of the client, and it's divided up into different items, including services, program enrollments, referrals, reservations, and assessments. One thing to note is that the items you see in the client's history tab will be affected by the sharing and access role settings established by your system administrator. Your particular access role may mean that you don't see all of the entire history of the client. If there's something you need to see and you're not seeing, please contact your agency manager first or your system administrator. In the History tab, the different items will be color-coded to make them easier to find. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, the key to those colors will be found at the bottom. Program enrollments will be highlighted in tan. Services like shelter stays, meals, case management, financial aid, and any other kinds of services provided to a client will be found in white. Referrals are a tool that our community does not use yet, but they will be highlighted in blue. Reservations for shelter stays will be found highlighted in pink. And finally, assessments like the DI SPDAT will be found highlighted in green. Now let's go over a few of these items so you can know where to go to look for specific kinds of information. First, let's look at program enrollments. In a program enrollment, just looking at the program enrollment item, it'll have the name of the program, and then it will have the date that the client was enrolled, and then under end date, if the client has not been exited from the program, it will say active. If the client has been exited from the program, it'll have the date when they were closed out. Where you see the other video on program enrollments and exiting for how to take care of that. When you open a particular program enrollment, it'll bring you to the program service history. Under the program service history, you can see the services that have been provided within that program for the client. If you hover over this icon at the end, looks like a speech bubble, it'll pull up any notes that were entered for that service item. Okay, now we'll go back to the history. Okay, one thing that you need to keep in mind is that for someone to stay in a shelter, in most cases, the shelter will have enrolled them into the shelter program. For example, this client has been enrolled in the Rescue Missions Women and Children Center program. This just means that they're eligible for services under that program, and most of the time it will say active. This is different from looking for the client's actual shelter stays. Shelter stays are actually a service. So if you're looking for the dates of a client's stay, you're going to want to look for a white shelter stay item. So we're going to go down here to shelter stay, emergency shelter, WCC. This particular client began staying at a rescue mission on October 7th. And the last stay they have recorded was on October 20th. If you're looking for the very last time they stayed in the shelter, you're just going to look at the end date. That's the last day that they were marked present in a bed in the shelter. If you need to know dates of all of their shelter stays, you're going to want to open this service item up by going over to the left and clicking the pencil, open the service item, and then scrolling all the way down to the bottom. In the bottom, you'll find the attendance entries area. In this case, it is broken down the client's shelter stay into each individual time that they were marked present in their bed. In this case, the client has actually stayed every night between October 7th and October 20th. So if you need to report nights of a shelter guest stay for a particular agency, this is where you would go to look up their individual nights of stay. All right, now we'll go back to history. Another thing that can be confusing when it comes to shelter stays is the fact that the client will also have a reservation listed in their service history. Beds can be reserved for clients at shelters and for a certain length of time. So initially, when this client started staying at the Women and Children Center at the Rescue Mission, a reservation was placed for her bed from October 7th to October 13th. And she was marked present for each of those nights. Then the shelter decided to extend her reservation. So they entered more reservation dates. And now she currently has a bed reserved from October 14th until October 31st. A reservation does not mean that the client actually stayed. A reservation just means that a bed was reserved for their use on that particular date. Once again, you'd have to go to the service item entry to find the actual dates where they were marked present. All right. Finally, the last history item we're going to look at is an assessment. This client has been administered the VI SPDAT for families, and it was administered on October 11th. You can open up this item as long as the agency has not marked their SPDAT information as private. You can open up their SPDAT to see the actual answers that the client gave on this assessment. If you want to see what a SPDAT score is, then you would have to go to the Assessments tab at the top. Click on the Assessments tab. You scroll down to the client's assessment history. And here in the assessment item, within the details, right here in this bubble score, the client score on the SPDAT is a total of 7. If you hover over this bubble, it'll bring up an item that shows the individual scores they got on the different SPDAT areas, if you want to just know that information. But if you just need the total score, come to Assessments, the assessment history, and look in the bubble for their SPDAT score. And that's it. That's what information we can find in the client's history tab. If you have any questions, please consult the Bitfocus Help Desk articles for more information. And a link to the History tab overview article will be included in the YouTube entry for this video. Thank you.